Welcome to Leadership Coaching, the podcast, which builds on conventional wisdom and adds a fresh perspective on this ever-evolving field of coaching. Have we been misunderstanding leadership all along? Traditionally, we ascribe leadership to certain people, but what if leadership lives in relationships instead? If you've been struggling with your identity as a leader, it may be that limitations of an old model just don't fit. Join leadership coach Dr. Martin Kettlehut and results coach and certified IFS practitioner Bill Tierney as we discuss the nuances of leadership as relation. The Leadership Coaching Podcast, awakening the confident and compassionate leader within.
Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Coaching Podcast. My name is Bill Tierney. I'm a results coach and certified IFS practitioner, and this is my co-host, Dr. Martin Kettlehut, who I refer to as Marty. Others refer to as Doc, who's a leadership coach and the author of Leadership as Relation. And this episode, we're calling Solving the Wrong Problem. I've been reading Marty's book, and I haven't quite finished it yet. I'm up to chapter 16, I believe, and in the book, I was inspired by something that I read that I now am going to ask Marty to read to you, and then we'll get into our topic, solving the wrong problem.
Okay, cool. Here we go. Often a client will come to me believing he knows the source of the challenge he's facing. And so without explaining the challenge, he just asks for help fixing what he thinks is the source of the problem. For example, George had trouble remembering names of new people he met. And since he was going to a networking event that night, he asked them to teach him a mnemonic system to fix the problem of remembering names. When I tested his hypothesis in our coaching session, it didn't hold water. Several reliable mnemonic systems we tried failed to help him remember names. Since he was nervous about the networking event that night, I offered to accompany him and help him remembering people's names. That evening, as I observed him meeting people and attempting to implement the one mnemonic device we'd had a little success with when we experimented earlier in the day, I noticed as he met each new person, he was preoccupied with his supposed forgetfulness, using this mnemonic system, shaking the other person's hand correctly, looking them in the eye, and straightening his tie. He was always thinking about something other than the name itself as it was first uttered. So instead of adding a mnemonic system to his thoughts, which just complicated things, we went to work on George's ability to pay attention in the moment the name is said to the name itself, and to repeat it back to the new acquaintance. This immediately solved the problem. Notice what leads us to the solution was not an a priori fix. A priori means self-evident, something that you already know. Nor was it tenaciously implementing his theory that a mnemonic device was the answer to the problem. We needed to observe through multiple iterations what was actually in the way and what actually facilitated remembering names.
Okay, very good. Love that story. And if you haven't got Marty's book yet, Leadership as Relation, the Art and Science of Heart-Led Leadership, I recommend that you pick it up. Got my copy through Amazon. That was page 99, I believe, when you started reading.
That's
Marty.
right. Yes.
Yeah. Recommend the book. Let me just tell you right up front, though, it's not going to be a whiz-bang easy read. It's you're going to have to do a little bit of work as you read this book. It's going to make you think. It's going to make you maybe challenge some of your own preconceived ideas. Maybe you'll find that you're thinking about things that you assume are just as things are, only you realize, oh, maybe they don't have to be that way. So it's a very, very potentially life-changing book here. So let's get into it.
You're saying that because on both sides of the reader knows, so that, they don't go, if they're looking for an easy read by the pool, this might not be it.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a challenging read by the pool.
Yeah, right.
And also, Thank you for acknowledging that it's not just another leadership book. There are lots of them out there, and this really does go do some of the heavy lifting of creating a new paradigm, like a different way to think about leadership. So yes, it's going to be challenging.
Right. It's not going to be a formula to memorize and then execute either.
Right.
What I noticed as I'm reading through the book is because of the way it does challenge my preset and programmed way of viewing the world, bit by bit by bit, it's changing how I interact with the world.
Nice. I like to hear that.
So you and I are leaders who coach and leaders who we both also write. You've got published books, 2 of them. I don't have any published books yet. I like to write. I've got blog articles. I don't know how many, 200-300 blog articles. I know you have a ton of blog articles too, but there's a lot of different ways to lead besides just the 2 that I've named for you and I, coaching and writing.
One form of writing that you've done a lot of that I have not, you create workbooks.
Yeah.
I have a big, thick workbook on my shelf from the time that we were doing coaching together. And I know you've written several since then. So that's a huge talent of yours.
Oh, thank you. You know, the book that I'm working on right now was going to be just an edited version of one of those workbooks like the one that I gave you. But once I began to write it, I realized this is going to require really more than just a set of exercises for people to do. They need to understand why to do these exercises in the first place. So now I'm pretty challenged as I'm writing the book that I realized needed to be written rather than the one that I thought I wanted to. And what it's requiring is that I share with the reader what it is that I experienced to learn what I learned, because I didn't go the route of education beyond high school. I didn't go the route of being trained to learn all of these things that I learned about healing, personal recovery, personal development. I went through my own self-directed education. Many of the years that I was going through my self-directed education, I didn't realize that's what I was doing. It felt to me like I was just barely getting by. But that was so much part of my education. Anyhow, it's been a challenge. It's also been enlightening for me and lots of fun. And I'm really, really enjoying it, really having a good and challenging time writing it. So it's quite an experience. Hopefully it'll get done one of these days and get published.
I'm sure it will.
Well, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
And we designed a project. And by the way, I'm doing well on that project.
Okay.
I'm taking a lot of the actions already that I said I was going to take, and I'm moving in the direction that I want to.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
I wonder if it would be helpful to demonstrate, like in a coaching setting, an example of solving the wrong problem, similar to what you described in your book.
Well, by the way, as I was reading that, I was thinking, yes, I can. It's amazing how many different thoughts we can have at once. And I'm almost embarrassed to say that, because I like to think that I'm single-minded, focused on the one thing in front of me at any given time, but it's not true. That this happened in our mastermind circle a couple of weeks ago to me, and it's nobody's fault. I hadn't clearly articulated but I was getting a lot of coaching from the group on solving a problem that had to do with creating a design plan, right? But the real problem that I was suffering in that moment was I didn't know what to design. I didn't know where I wanted the plan to lead yet. Well, it was a very frustrating moment for me, because I'm like, wait a minute, I get coached on the wrong thing, or I didn't even want that in the moment. So there's another example.
That's a great example. And if you're comfortable continuing to use that, we can certainly use that. I want to throw out another one. Just came to mind as you were sharing that. And that is that when I was going through a particular training, I won't name the training. I don't want to name anybody involved in it, but I just want to talk about the experience. In the training, I was really upset to find that one of the students was coming into the training intoxicated. I could smell alcohol on their breath. I was noticing slurring of the words. I was noticing almost like behavior that you would expect to see in a bar room by someone that's there only just to get completely liberated from any kind of inhibition. So I thought, well, the responsible thing for me to do here is to go to the trainer and point out that this student is inebriated, and not just today. This is the fourth or fifth time in a row. This is a training that took that lasted over the course of months. So when I went to the trainer and I said, so and so, I want you to know that so and so is under the influence, and I was shocked by the trainer's response to me. The response was, "What did you say to them?" I went to them because I wanted them to solve the problem.
Right. Sure.
I certainly didn't expect that they would expect me to solve the problem. But after I got done being really pissed off at the trainer about it, just handing it back to me and not taking responsibility for the integrity of the training, which is valid also, I realized, what was the problem that I wanted the trainer to solve for me? I wanted the trainer to create an environment where I felt safe to learn. This kind of learning environment was going to require that I be vulnerable, that I be open, and for me, I needed to trust that the people I was in that training with were going to be reliable to, to be sober as a bare minimum, but also to be somewhat regulated and responsible with what I was about to share with them if I was going to be asked to do that. So that's the problem I thought that the trainer was responsible to solve for me. The problem that the trainer perceived was that I was uncomfortable with one of my fellow students being intoxicated. And the trainer's response was just to kind of hold me responsible for the problem that I had, rather than to focus on the other student as if they had a problem. Now, I'm still not fully 100% satisfied with the way that whole thing was handled, but it was a shocker, and it was also an example of just two dramatically different perceptions of what was going on in the moment. I did go to the other student.
Yes.
And I was scared, nervous. I grew up in an alcoholic, violent family. Where there's alcohol, there's a lot of unpredictability. You can almost expect there's going to be violence. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be gaslighting. There's going to be blaming. There's going to be a lot of anger. And this is the kind of energy that I was picking up from this other student. So surprisingly, the response that I got from them was, yeah, I did. I had a drinks till about 1 or 2 in the morning last night, and you're still smelling on me today. I wasn't aware of things bringing it to my attention. That was pretty much it. And surprisingly, this student made it all the way through the entire training, and so did I. And I don't know if they did anything about it or not, but once I realized that I couldn't just hand it off to the trainer and that it was just going to be my responsibility to be with myself and my own discomfort through this whole thing, I found ways to get through the training without being bothered by this.
So this is an example of solving the wrong problem.
It is. I thought the problem was the other student. Turns out the problem was my own discomfort.
Okay. And so what can we learn from that and these other examples about this phenomenon in general?
Well, I guess the first thing I want to say is that by acknowledging the hazards of assuming that we understand the problem before we actually do, we can put a lot of energy, time, and maybe some and get some unintended consequences from trying to solve the wrong problem.
Right.
And what I'm curious about and interested in is if there's a way to kind of name a an alternate process. How can we make sure that if there's a problem to be solved, the right person's solving it, and the right problem is being solved? So that brings in a lot of curiosity-based questions that we've all been trained, that our coaches and a lot of leaders have been trained in the same way to ask before diving in to try to fix
Yes.
or resolve anything.
Mhm.
So that's one of the things that I have, been learning. It's one of the things I actually try to teach a little bit with my clients when they're open to being taught. What would you say? What is that to learn for you out of this?
Well, the first thing that reminds me of is this saying. It probably occurs in all cultures in some way, shape, or form. Like, basically, beware the person who thinks he knows. He definitely doesn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And the person who comes to you and says, I really don't know, that person has is closer to the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It's saying something true, at least, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was Socrates was a famous example of these in ancient times, right? He was the one guy who didn't claim to know what justice was or what the army should do, or he always said, "Well, let's see what should are you sure that's right? What makes you think that?" He would question every theory, every hypothesis that was brought up, and so he was known as the guy who knew more than anyone because he was humble about putting forth any statement. And so I think that where that leads me is in that Socratic mode of like, well, let's question if you think that, like in my example, if you think that learning a mnemonic device is going to solve the problem, let's experiment. Let's wade into that, right? See how that works, which is what we did.
Mm-hmm.
Found like that wasn't solving the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I'm curious. Do you, if you recall, I'm sure you probably do. Did you go into that just assuming that he had correctly identified the problem that he was trying to solve?
no,
No. What did you go into it with instead of that?
I was listening for what is going to help him remember names. That's what the client wanted, was to remember names.
Uh-huh.
When he told me he just needed a mnemonic device, I was still treading water around this issue. I'm not swimming off in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still treading water. Let's try mnemonic devices, but I'm listening for what's really going on here.
Got it. Right. And so a lot of the
Like a doctor. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Go ahead. I think you're going to say something similar to what I was going to say.
Sometimes that has happened in our family with our family doctor at times where he's like, no, I'm not sure what's causing that. Let's hold off on all. I remember one time inflammation inducing foods for a week and see if that makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the eczema started to go away. Okay, so it's got something to do with, now we can narrow it down, right? But it's that experimental, like what if we put a little bit of salt in the dinner and see if that makes it taste better, rather than assuming it's salt we need and dumping too much on. Put a little bit, test it with a little bit first and see if that has the effect that you want. If so, okay, then we can go further. So it's that wading in, testing, experimenting before coming to an absolute conclusion.
Uh-huh. Okay. Brings up another example in my history, which is that I landed in Alcoholics Anonymous on November 15th, 1982. And what everybody else in the meeting that I went to that night seemed to assume was that I was there because I had a problem with alcohol. Seemed like a safe assumption, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here's what was actually true. I was there because I thought that the guy that invited me to the meeting was having an affair with my wife.
Sorry, that's not funny.
Well, it is now. And I wanted to keep an eye on him. I'd already confronted my wife about it, and she denied it. I hadn't confronted him directly, but when he invited me to a meeting, first of all, I was offended. why would somebody invite me to an AA meeting, for God's sakes? That's ridiculous. I don't have a problem. Of all the people that I know that have problems, I don't have a problem. And I was angry at him for his arrogance, for assuming that I did. And I go to the meeting, and I'm assuming that everybody else assumed that I was there because I had a problem with alcohol. What I didn't know was that I had a problem with alcohol. Now, here's some other assumptions and gradually, like over the next few days, even because I continued to go to meetings, I realized that I did, in fact, have a problem with alcohol. Here's the next level of assumption that actually kind of delayed my actual recovery for years and years and years. And that was that the fact that I drank alcohol, the amount of alcohol that I drank, when I drank, what happened when I drank, all those things were certainly more symptomology related to whatever the problem was. But the problem that needed to be solved was not that I drank alcohol or even how much I drank or what I did when I drank it. It took me a long time to realize this, like over 25 years of being sober and not having a single drink of alcohol before I realized what I'm really recovering from is my unhealed past. I'm recovering from my trauma. And what it is that I'm actually recovering is my true authentic self. That's what there is to recover. And that's what there is to recover from. It's not alcohol, although it was a good idea to stop drinking it for me. One of the first indications that I might have been trying to solve the wrong problem was I kept counting my time. Okay, I've been sober a week. Things aren't really that much better. How come things aren't better? I haven't had a drink for a whole week. Now it's been 30 days. And in some ways, yeah, things are better. I've saved some money. I'm not spending so much money on alcohol, but God, I'm nervous all the time. And I've got a short fuse. And so now I'm 30 days sober. I think, well, after 30 days of sobriety, then everything should be solved because the problem is alcohol. No, man, I'm a mess. 30 days. Okay, how about 6 months? I'll give it 6 months. And then I'm sure life's going to be better at 6 months. Well, I made it 6 months. Life was not better, man. Life was getting crazier. I was getting crazier. I didn't understand it. I was working the steps, going to meetings, doing service work, getting a big book, doing all the things they said to do. And so, okay, well, I'll get a year sobriety. That's it. I'll stay sober for a whole year. The story goes on and on and on. 10 years, that's when it's really going to kick in. No, 20 years, that's when, at 20, pretty soon I finally realized, maybe this is as good as it gets. Wow. And maybe at about 21 years, I finally had the thought, maybe it's not just alcohol. In fact, maybe alcohol was the solution for me. And without it now for the last 20 years, and without finding an adequate substitute, I'm going to just have to deal with whatever the problem the alcohol was trying to solve. And that's when recovery began for me. Over 20 years, I was trying to solve the wrong problem.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. One thing that I think it's helpful to keep in mind is the difference between an hypothesis, like it might be that I'm an alcoholic and therefore the alcohol's the problem. Or but that's a hypothesis. What's the nature of a hypothesis? It needs evidence, right? You could say, well, I think that they're eating cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio. Well, get evidence. Show me. That's a hypothesis. Fine. Hypothetical. Nothing wrong with hypotheticals. I mean, Jonas Salk said, well, maybe if we inject people with a little bit of polio, that their systems will build immunity to it and they'll be stronger and they won't get polio. And well, let's experiment. People had to volunteer. Yeah. And we did experiments and we found out, hey, his hypothesis, we got 10,000 cases, we got 20,000 cases. There's evidence now that this works. So it's important to understand the category of statement that you're making, the status of which is different from a theory. A theory's been around for a long time and we haven't found any evidence against it. Like gravity, for example. We have a formula and it keeps working. It does seem that the size and distance of bodies from each other does work in this way that gravity describes. And we haven't found a case where it doesn't. So that's a theory, though. It's not a hypothesis anymore. It's got evidence behind it, lots of it. Right.
Hypothesis, we need evidence. A theory, we have evidence.
And even at that, a theory is indeterminate to a certain extent forever. I mean, till all evidence that could ever be has been collected. And none of us are going to live that long. So in a way, theories are open-ended too, but not as open-ended as a hypothesis, which is just like a good guess and needs some evidence.
Mm-hmm. Chapter 6, starting on page 87, the scientific method. Right? Out of your book. Okay, so what made you think of that? As I'm talking about my 20-year journey of solving the wrong problem, by the way, I also want to throw in that I am so glad that I stopped drinking. Once I realized that what the problem that drinking was trying to solve, once I knew what that was and got to working on that, at no point did it make any sense to me, well, then I should drink again. Because, well, for one thing, my life had gotten a lot better. There were a lot of problems that I was watching other people that continued to drink have that I never did have. So alcohol does cause a lot of problems for a lot of people. And I had escaped that for the last 41 years now, almost 42 years. And it never has occurred to me to drink again for that reason, but also because I don't feel like I need it. Like whatever problem it was that alcohol was trying to solve has been solved enough now by the work that I've done since I realized that's the work there was to do, that I don't need it anymore. And why in the world would I risk all that I've gained as a result of not drinking? So I just wanted to say that because it might have sounded like, well, if he was solving the wrong problem, he should have been drinking the whole time. No, not at all.
Right. No, and by the way, I'm not sure the word that carries enough power to express how proud and admiring I am of you that you are 40 years sober. That's huge.
It blows me away. Thank you, thank you for the acknowledgement. Yeah, it just is shocking.
Yeah. Imagine if the whole world were alcohol free. Imagine.
Well, yeah. If we were, how about imagine the whole world under the influence of reality rather than a substance or some other delusion.
Right. Which takes us back to the importance of knowing the status of your assertion that is this hypothesis I'm trying to prove? Like my client comes in with the hypothesis, I need a mnemonic device. I know it's a hypothesis because it just got presented to me. I don't have any evidence for anything yet. Right. But I think a lot of times I have some very dear friends who have been very deluded by stuff that it was on the internet. Like, has it been vetted? Did you experiment yourself? Did you get any other evidence to corroborate some wacko's theory? You really need to pay attention to the status of our assertions, where none of those statuses are bad, but they have implications. Like that hasn't been proven yet.
You made an interesting comment the other day that I want to ask you about now. It seems like it's a good time to ask it in this conversation, and that is that we were talking about, does this person follow the scientific method?
Yeah.
Do these particular people in my life follow the scientific method? And I wondered about myself, do I? And I said to you that that's what I was thinking was, I'm not sure, do I? And you said it. You said, absolutely, you follow the scientific method. That's what IFS is all about. Can you say more about that? Is this a good are you comfortable addressing that here?
Sure. No, I observe you in all, not just when we talk IFS, but in other contexts too. Well, you seem very clear about the difference between an opinion or like a one person's idea versus something that's been corroborated, and the other people have gotten the same result in a different context, so that it adds to the validity.
Mm-hmm.
I see you doing that.
Okay. All right.
And it's very different from, when you're with somebody. I mean, it's kind of sad sometimes when you see somebody say, well, what about those Democrats and eating babies, in the basement of the pizza parlor? Like, what? Do you realize the status of what you're saying? Like, do you have any evidence for that at all? Where, you're saying it like it's a truth. And there's no self-consciousness around the status of these assertions. That's dangerous.
That's an extreme example, of course, but it's useful. Extremes are useful sometimes. An everyday example of that for almost everybody is that we carry around beliefs that either never were true or are no longer true. And they operate so deeply within our unconscious, we're not even aware that they're running the show for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Until something happens or till someone says, what?
Mm-hmm.
What?
Or evidence shows up that's very much the contrary. Like, how did that happen? I think, like my family of origin, my brothers and my mom and dad, they have it that I'm not good with money, that I don't know how to handle money. And I believe it to a certain extent too, honestly, because I grew up with that ringing in my ears and the behavior around it that accompanies it. And so my brother was really surprised when we were talking over the weekend, and I was telling him about how I've invested, the little bit of money that I have. And he's like, wow, that's really smart. How did you come up with that? I didn't think you would. Like, he has it like it's just true that Marty doesn't know how to work with money.
Yeah. Well, and we have it that there are certain things true about us, especially in the realm of shame. What is it that's wrong with Bill? Well, earlier versions of myself could give you a list that we'd be talking about tomorrow still, if we started now.
Okay.
What do you mean? What's wrong? What category should we start with? Everything's wrong with Bill. And so there have been times in my life when essentially people refused to accept what I had accepted as true about myself. I remember a 6th grade teacher. I want to say it was Sister Mary Carita. It was one of the nuns.
Right. And
life hadn't been very easy for me. And now I'm 11 years old. I'm going into the 6th grade Catholic school. I think I'm stupid. It's one of the conclusions that I drew about myself, is that I'm stupid. One of the things Dad used to say often enough for me to remember what he said, although even though I looked it up one time, I don't remember what it means. He used to say that I didn't have enough brains to wad a shotgun. And I remember at least being smart enough to wonder why I would ever need to do that. and as well as, how many brains does it take? I mean, how many, anyhow, but the message was clear. Not smart. So now I'm in the 6th grade, Sister Mary Carita, and she is a different kind of teacher. She's got us all working on these individual projects. And she's walking around the classroom, and she's looking at what we're doing, whether it's something that we're drawing or a math problem that we're working on or some writing that we're doing or something.
Mm-hmm.
And she just gets really interested in what I was doing. And I am nervous with the attention. It really is making me nervous that she's giving me all this attention. And it was a math problem that I was working on.
Okay.
And my grandpa on my dad's side had made up this baseball game using a poker deck of cards. And the game was so elaborate that after you played a 9-inning game with 9 players on 2 teams, you could put together all the statistics and figure out the batting averages. I had learned how to do that in when I was 8 years old. Dad had taught me that if I divided the number of hits by the number of at bats, it would give me my batting average in a decimal.
Yeah.
And back in 1963, they weren't teaching decimals to 8-year-olds. And in fact, they were just starting to teach them by the time I was 11. And so this is one of the things Sister Mary Teresa had seen. She handed me out the worksheet, and I was almost done when she came around and saw that I was almost done, and she expected it to take the entire class time. And she said, "Wow." And I thought I was in trouble. I really did. And she said, "You're really smart." Really? Shocking. Somebody else saw that it didn't occur to me that I was. It had never occurred to me that I was.
Well,
Really believed that I was stupid.
another example and I wrote about this in my newsletter that came out this morning. I've had many clients come to me and say, I need more client, I need more conversations, I need more telephone calls, I need more people, more. They're not getting anywhere because they're going in so many different directions. Like anybody who can fog a mirror, I'll deal with them, just get some business in the door. And that doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't solve the problem. And they're wondering why. They haven't chosen a target market. They don't have a vision for the kind of conversations they want to be having with the kind of people they want. Like if you haven't said what you want and structured your marketing accordingly, then it's not going to solve the problem. You're going to be splattered all over the map. And so it's not about more, it's about what's the quality of conversation, the quality of person, you have to ask the qualitative questions. And then, you've actually got like a win or pick your favorite analogy, but something that's actually going to grip the statistics that you want to make.
That's right.
So that there's another, he thought, well, this is based on a conversation with the client. He thought, I just need to ask Dr. Kettlehead how to get more people to talk to, more appointments, more, because after all, it's a numbers game, right? Everybody knows that. He was solving for the problem of not having enough rather than recognizing that there are many more potential clients out there than you need. And what you need to do is to laser focus on what's the experience you really want to be having.
One more example, and then I think we need to begin to wrap up. We're about almost 40 minutes into this episode. Can you believe it? What comes to mind is maybe one of the most common and obvious ones. Dr. Kettlehead, I'm just not happy. I need to make more money. I'm sure that if I made more money, I'd be happy. Another, I don't know, $30,000, $40,000 a year, which should do it. So can you show me how to make another $30,000 or $40,000 a year?
There you go. Right. Yeah. And what's the connection between that money and your happiness, actually?
Well, everybody knows you're happier if you have more money, right?
Well, that's not the case. I know some very wealthy people who are quite unhappy.
Yeah.
It didn't seem to solve their problem.
As always, an interesting conversation. Any takeaways that you'd like to share? Any final thoughts before we conclude this episode?
Well, just to go back to, I think we all need to be a little bit more like a scientist. I mean, not in some strict sense, but aware of the status of the notions that we have, right? Is that a proven theory, or is that a hypothesis you're looking for evidence for, or is that a single piece of evidence? This came up in a conversation recently. A client or a friend, wasn't a client, went to great lengths to prove to me that this Muslim person was anti-Semitic. Like, great. Okay, you found an example of somebody's answer, but that does not mean, which was what he was trying to show me, was that all Muslims are anti-Semitic. I'm like,
I see.
case does not make a rule. So understanding the status of our statements, I just want to bring that back. And it's great. Just know that you're always in this sort of experimenting, exploring, and gathering evidence and seeing what really holds water. That's the name of the game of being human. It's not about a priori truth forevermore, or, being the soul. What do you call it? The only person who knows the truth, or anything like that.
Mhm.
We're all. That's why you want to get into conversation too. Like, what evidence do you have for this? Does this make sense to you? This hypothesis.
Mhm.
What evidence would you have for that? As long as you go it alone, it's even harder. So it's
Oh, yeah.
better to answer these questions in community.
So be more scientific. If I wear a white lab coat and wear glasses and have a pocket protector, then that should do it. Yes.
Well,
It doesn't quite solve the problem, does it? But I could start there, I guess. All right.
I mean, it's not a bad. There's no criticism in this either. Like, this is the nature of the beast, and so enjoy it.
Mhm.
Enjoy following up on your ideas and seeing if they hold water.
Yeah. Enjoy making your life an experiment.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. We will talk to you next week. Thank you very much, Dr. Martin Kettlehead.
Thank you, Bill Attorney.
Take care.
That concludes another episode of the Leadership Coaching Podcast. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights to fuel your leadership journey. Remember, true leadership is not about you, it's about empowering others. Take your insights to heart and cultivate a mindset that will transform leadership from within your business, organization, or community. Thank you for joining us on this quest to leadership excellence. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for our upcoming episodes, where we explore leadership as relation. Until next time, remember that you have the power to lead with confidence and compassion from the inside out.